English immigrants Charles Joseph Gordon Logie and Rosa Clare Friedlander first met at the home of the Mormon mission president in Sydney, Australia. While walking down the street with two other men, Charles spotted two young women sitting on the second-floor balcony of the mission president's home.
My, many young seamen are out on this fine evening.
Too old for me.
Oh, Rosa, you're 16. What about that fine man? He's talking with the other two.
Which one?
The one on the right. He looks like a sailor.
I suppose.
Meanwhile, the three men in question were walking on the road just in front of the house. Rosa's face caught their attention. Quickly talking to each other, they made an agreement that the first one to get to her got to date her.
Look at that beauty.
One problem, Fred. There's three of us and one of her.
Oh yeah? I bet you that I could get to her first.
I'll take that bet. The first one there gets to court.
Count me in.
Two of the men ran to the front door, knocking loudly, hoping to gain a quick entrance. Charles spotted a rose trellis, and braving the cuts and punctures, quickly scaled it to arrive in front of Rosa before the other two were even on the stairs.
Who was knocking at the door? Could it be that young man we were just speaking of?
Good evening, ladies.
Oh, what are you doing here?
I thought I would come up and make your acquaintance.
Your hands. Are you hurt?
I'm not hurt unless you say no. Will you go out with me?
Well, in that case, yes, I will.
At the end of a short romance, the couple married and soon had a baby daughter when Annie Augusta Logie joined the family. A call went out from Mormon Church headquarters in Salt Lake City, Utah, asking church members from around the world to gather to help build the cities along the Wasatch Front in Utah. Along with a small group of Mormons in Sydney, Charles and Rosa booked passage to San Francisco aboard the ship Julia Ann. The ship's crew grumbled that the ship would never reach port with Mormons and women on board, little knowing that their superstition would actually prove true this time. Due to his experience as a seaman, Charles was able to pay for most of their passage by hiring on as the ship's pilot. The weather was beautiful in Sydney on the day of their departure, in a late September morning in 1855. The 26 Mormons and crews sailed out of port looking forward to a pleasant trip across the Pacific Ocean. Little did Charles, or the Julia Ann's captain, Benjamin Pond, know that the navigational maps that Pond had purchased were off by 100 miles. Charles was relieved at the ship's wheel at 9 p.m. on October 3rd. He had barely settled down to sleep when the ship suddenly lurched with a huge crunching sound. It had hit an underwater reef. The hull of the ship was compromised, and it started to sink. The navigational maps had directed the ship some 90 miles windward of its intended route. The reef they hit was part of the Scilly Island Reef, deep in the South Pacific.
Jump! I'll catch you. Charles, what about the baby?
Wrap the baby in your shawl. Tie her around my back.
Chaz, will we be all right?
Yes, we'll be fine. Come on. Billy Williams, catch my wife.
Standing on the ridge of the reef in almost chest-deep water, Charles held the faces of his diminutive wife Rosa and baby Ann above the water as he slowly made his way to a dry section of the reef. Envision yourself completely surrounded by waves, only being able to see during flashes of lightning. The taller among them could touch the submerged reef with their feet. Their ship was quickly sinking. But there, in the distance, the reef rose above the waves. 5 Mormons were drowned, 2 women and 3 children. The survivors were able to save the rowboat and most of the carpenter's tools from the ship, in addition to a large silk petticoat. Walking on the unseen reef, they made their way to high ground. The reef was covered by short brush, birds, and not much else. Charles and Rosa were given the petticoat to make a makeshift shelter for Rosa and baby Ann. Using a hammer, the men dug a well by hammering down through the coral reef. The coral was porous enough to allow water from the ocean to seep in, but it also filtered out most of the salt in the water, making it safe to drink, although it didn't taste good. The survivors ate coconuts that washed up on shore and the meat from birds and turtles that they caught. When the turtles came up on beach, the men tipped them over on their backs and then carried them to a small temporary corral that they'd built, where they could be harvested for food and other uses.
I'm hungry. I'm tired of eating turtle meat.
The Julia Ann went down well out of normal shipping lanes. No other ships passed by the atoll. If they hoped to survive, they had to find another source of food and hopefully a ship that could take them to safety. After a number of days, a decision was made to man the rowboat to try and find help and food. Captain Pond wanted to row north, toward the shipping lanes in the open ocean of the South Pacific. Charles Logie had a dream that if they did, they would die. He saw the rowboat floating bottom up with the drowned bodies of the crew floating around her, while the route to the east was safe.
Here's the plan. We take 10 men out to the rowboat and try to find one of the ships in the shipping route north of us.
Wait one moment, Captain Pond. Brother Logie here had a dream last night, and it shows that we will not survive if we go north.
A dream, did he? Ha! Dreams mean nothing.
We believe differently, Captain. When we have revelation from God, it is best that we follow it.
That's preposterous. Does your God mean to lead us to our deaths? The best route for us, if we want to live, is to the north.
Well, listen for a moment. I will not be going if we go north. That's a fact. Another fact is that you will not be able to row the boat safely anywhere if you don't have enough people.
Now, Charles, that is taking this too far.
I'm not going.
A day of discussion passed with no decision being made. The crew needed one more man to man the oars. Without him, they wouldn't make it to safety on either route. But Charles refused to go with them if they went to the north. Several days later, Charles had another dream, with a crew of 10 men rowing to the east, where they would find a friendly island after 3 days. Because Charles was young and a seaman by trade, he was selected to fill the empty seat in the boat. However, he once more refused to go with the crew if Captain Pond insisted on rowing toward the north.
Captain Pond, I had another dream last night. If we row to the east for 3 days, we will find an island and people. I will only go with you if you row to the east.
Don't like it, but if that's the only way you'll go with us, then that's what we'll do.
Almost immediately after reaching open water, the crew had to throw most of their water and provisions overboard to lighten the load. Heavy rain fell, and then a storm cloud, as black as night, descended on the rowboat. After many hours, the storm abated. The sun came out, and a dead calm surrounded the boat. No wind was available for its little sail to aid in its propulsion. The second mate became very ill and had to lie at the bottom of the boat for a full day. Near the end of the 3rd day, the rowers were completely exhausted. Their lives were now at high risk. They threw a tarpaulin over the boat to protect them from the salt spray that was flying over them, when suddenly a cry rang out, "Land! Land!" Charles Logie's dream had been correct. They found land on their 3rd day. Reaching land, they determined that they still weren't safe. The Ashurly natives on the islands probably weren't peaceful. Leaving some of the crew on the shore, the boat put out to sea again to row around the perimeter of the island, looking for a sign of any Europeans. The ship Emma Packer was found. Its captain was on a trading mission to the island. Boarding the ship, Captain Pond quickly told its crew of the peril facing the survivors of the Julia Ann. The Emma Packer took the rowboat crew from the Julia Ann back to the atoll to rescue the shipwrecked survivors. When they arrived in the early dawn, no one was seen or responded to the calls from the ship. Charles Logie refused to consider that they had perished, and they hadn't. Weak from heat, lack of food and water, the survivors lay semi-conscious under the knee-high brush. On December 2nd, 1855, 60 days after the shipwreck, the survivors raised their heads to the shouts of Charles and others on the ship and sighted the Emma Packer. The shoeless and destitute company arrived in Tahiti on December the 19th, where they were cared for by the United Order of Masonic Lodges. All the original survivors of the wreck eventually found passage from Tahiti and made it to San Francisco. Most trekked east to the Great Basin in Utah. Charles and Rosa had to remain in Tahiti for almost a year while he worked to earn enough money for their passage to San Francisco. After arriving, they made their way to Carson City, Nevada, where Charles worked on a ranch for a period of time to again earn enough money to continue their trip to Utah. They finally arrived in Salt Lake Valley in the spring of 1857, a year and a half after they began their journey. Few of us today have experienced such an arduous journey in our lives. By the end of their move to Utah, the Logies had traveled around 70% of the world since leaving their childhood homes in the British Empire.